Trust is a delicate thing. It takes years to build, moments to break, and a lifetime to repair, if it can be repaired at all. For 7 years, I thought I had a strong marriage. Sofia and I weren't perfect, but we were solid. Or at least, I believed we were. Looking back, I wonder if I had been blind from the start, or if she had simply been better at lying than I ever gave her credit for. The signs were there. They always are. But no one wants to believe their life is unraveling until it's too late to stop it. For me, it started with a perfume I didn't recognize. One night, Sofia came home late from work. It wasn't unusual. Her job as a marketing executive often kept her busy. I was sitting on the couch, half watching some late-night show when she walked in. She looked exhausted, her hair slightly tousled, her blouse unbuttoned just enough to make something stir uncomfortably in my gut. "Hey," she said, dropping her bag by the door. "God, I need a shower." I smiled at her, but the feeling in my stomach didn't go away. As she leaned down to kiss my forehead, a scent wrapped around me. Something musky, something undeniably not hers. She smelled like another man. I almost said something right then. My mouth opened, but no words came out. She was already heading to the bathroom, stripping off her blouse as she went. The door closed, and the sound of running water filled the apartment. I sat there, staring at the screen, but I wasn't watching anymore. The first fracture had formed. The next few weeks passed in a blur of little things that didn't add up. Sofia started going out more. "Girls' nights," she said, but she never used to be the type to need space from me. Now, she was suddenly full of plans. Drinks with colleagues, weekend brunches, late-night business meetings that seemed to stretch longer each time. One night, as she was getting ready, I leaned against the doorway and watched her. She was wearing a dress I had never seen before. Tight, elegant, the kind of dress that begged for attention. "You never go out on Fridays," I said. She laughed, adjusting her earrings. "I know, but I realized I need to have more fun." "You don't mind, do you?" I didn't mind. Or at least, I told myself I didn't. But I was starting to feel like a stranger in my own marriage. Then came the phone. Sofia had never been secretive with her phone before. We had always trusted each other enough to leave our devices lying around without a second thought. But now she was different. She started keeping it on silent, turning it face down on the table, taking it with her when she went to the bathroom. One night, after she had fallen asleep, I reached for it. My heart pounded in my chest as I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the screen. I didn't want to be that guy, the one who snoops, the one who doesn't trust his own wife. But something inside me whispered, "You already know." I unlocked it, and that's when my world began to fall apart. The room was silent except for the steady sound of Sofia's breathing. She lay next to me, her back turned, one arm draped lazily over a pillow. I could see the soft rise and fall of her chest, the faint glow of her phone's screen reflecting off the bedside table. My hand hovered over it, my pulse hammering in my ears. I had never gone through her phone before, never felt the need to. We had always been open with each other, always trusted without question. But something had changed. She had changed. And trust wasn't supposed to feel this uneasy, this fragile. I exhaled slowly, grabbed the phone, and turned it on. The lock screen lit up. No password. That surprised me. If she was hiding something, wouldn't she at least try to make it harder for me to find? Maybe it was my paranoia. Maybe I was letting my insecurities get the best of me. Then the screen flickered, and I saw the message. "Unknown number. Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you." A weight dropped into my stomach, heavy and cold. My breath caught in my throat as my mind tried to rationalize it, to twist it into something innocent. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it was a wrong number. Maybe, but as my trembling fingers tapped into her message history, the truth came rushing at me like a freight train. This wasn't the first message. There were dozens. Some deleted, but enough remained to paint the picture in brutal, unforgiving detail. Flirty conversations, plans to meet, mentions of last time and next time. All of it woven together into something undeniable, something sickening. And the worst part? She had never mentioned his name. There was no Mark or David or Ryan. Just unknown number. As if she wanted to keep him separate from her real life. As if she wanted to keep me separate from what she had been doing. My head spun. My hands felt numb. I could hear my own heartbeat. The slow thud of it pounding in my ears. I wanted to wake her up, shake her, demand answers. But what could she possibly say? I locked the phone and set it back on the nightstand, exactly where it had been. Then I lay back down beside my wife, staring at the ceiling, knowing that the world I had built with her had just shattered into a million pieces. The next morning, Sofia kissed me on the cheek before leaving for work. "I might be late tonight," she said casually, slipping on her coat. "Big project deadline." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "All right, be safe." She smiled, actually smiled, before walking out the door. I stood there in the kitchen for a long time after she left, gripping my coffee mug like it was the only thing tethering me to reality. She had lied to my face, so effortlessly, so naturally. How long had she been doing this? How many nights had she come home to me, kissed me, told me she loved me, while carrying the scent of another man on her skin? My mind raced back to every late night, every sudden work trip, every unanswered call. I had ignored the signs. I had trusted her. And now I was the fool. I couldn't focus on work that day. I kept replaying the messages in my head, reading between the lines, trying to piece together the parts she had deleted. Who was he? How had it started? Was I ever going to find out if I hadn't looked at her phone? By noon, I had made up my mind. I was going to find out everything. I had a friend, Maxim, who worked in cybersecurity. We had gone to college together, and he owed me a favor. I called him up. "Max, I need your help," I said, keeping my voice steady. "It's personal." There was a brief silence on the other end before he responded. "What kind of personal?" I hesitated, then said the words out loud for the first time. "I think Sofia's cheating on me." Maxim swore under his breath.
"Dumb man."
"You sure?" "Not completely," I admitted, rubbing my temples. "But I saw messages. Enough to know something's going on." He sighed. "All right, what do you need? Can you track a number? Find out who it belongs to?" Maxim didn't even hesitate. "Send it to me. I'll see what I can do." I texted him the unknown number and waited. That night I didn't confront her. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But I needed more. I needed proof that she couldn't twist, couldn't manipulate, couldn't lie her way out of. She came home late just like she said she would. I heard her key in the door, heard her heels click against the wooden floor as she walked in. I was sitting on the couch, pretending to watch TV. "Hey," she said, dropping her purse on the table. "How was your day?" I turned to look at her. She was wearing the same perfume as before, the one that wasn't hers. The scent hit me like a slap, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Fine," I said smoothly. "You?" She smiled. "Exhausting. I could fall asleep standing up." And then, without hesitation, she walked over and kissed me. I almost recoiled, almost pulled away, because all I could think about was how she had probably kissed him the same way earlier that night. How many times had she come home like this? How many times had I been nothing more than a placeholder while she gave herself to someone else? She walked to the bedroom, humming softly to herself, oblivious to the fact that her lies were crumbling around her. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, my pulse spiking. "Maxim, got a name for you. Call me." I took a slow breath. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from rage. I wasn't just going to find out the truth. I was going to burn the whole damn lie to the ground. I locked myself in the bathroom before calling Maxim back. The walls felt too tight, the air too thick. My reflection stared back at me in the mirror. Tired eyes, clenched jaw, veins pulsing in my neck. I barely recognized myself. The phone rang twice before he picked up. "I found him," Maxim said without hesitation. No small talk, no sympathy, just the cold truth I had asked for. I swallowed hard. "Who is he?" There was a brief pause, as if he was bracing for my reaction. Then he said the name, Denis Morozov. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Dennis. I knew him. I had shaken his hand. Sat across from him at dinner. He wasn't some stranger. He was one of Sofia's colleagues. One of the senior managers at her company. A married man. A friend. My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles turned white. Are you sure? As sure as I can be, Maxim said. The number is registered under his name. And if that's not enough, I checked his social media. He and your wife have been liking and commenting on each other's posts for months. Subtle, but it's there. I felt sick. This wasn't some nameless mistake. This wasn't a random fling that meant nothing. This was calculated. Planned. She had carried on an affair right under my nose, with someone we both knew. Someone I had never once thought to be a threat. Maxim exhaled.
Listen, Mann.
I don't know what you want to do with this, but I need proof. I cut in. My voice was steel. Real proof. Something she can't talk her way out of. Maxim hesitated. You mean like? Whatever it takes, I said. Find out where they meet. When? If you can get something solid, I want it. There was silence on the other end. Then a sigh. All right, but be careful, Oleg. If you go down this road, there's no turning back. I let out a humorless laugh. She burned the road down, Max. I'm just walking through the ashes. That night, I barely spoke to Sofia. She didn't seem to notice. She was glued to her phone, occasionally smiling at whatever she was reading. Probably his messages. Probably planning their next meeting. I stared at her, my mind a battlefield of emotions. Anger, betrayal, grief. How long had she been looking at me like this? Talking to him while I sat right next to her? How long had I been the idiot who thought he had a happy marriage while she was sneaking off to be with another man? She caught me staring. What? She asked, smiling slightly. I forced my lips into a smirk. Just thinking how lucky I am. The words tasted like poison. She chuckled, reaching for my hand. I love you, you know? I nearly flinched. Liar. I squeezed her fingers gently, pretending. I love you too. And for the first time, I meant it as a goodbye. The next day, Maxim called again. I have something for you, he said. I leaned against my car, gripping the phone. Tell me. They meet at a hotel. The same one. Every time. I felt my pulse throb in my temples. When's the next time? Maxim hesitated. Tomorrow. A slow, burning rage settled in my chest. This was it. The final nail in the coffin. I'll be there, I said. The plan was simple. I would follow her, watch her walk into that hotel. And once I saw her with my own eyes, once there was no room left for doubt, I would walk away. I wouldn't yell. I wouldn't fight. I would just let her destroy herself. The next morning, Sofia kissed me goodbye like she always did. Told me she was having lunch with a friend. I nodded, pretending to believe her. Then I followed her. I kept my distance, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly they ached. Every turn she made, I followed. Every red light, I held my breath. And then there it was, the hotel. She pulled into the parking lot and parked. I stopped a block away, just far enough not to be seen. I watched as she stepped out of the car, adjusting her coat, her hair. And then I saw him, Dennis. He was already there, standing by the entrance, waiting for her. She smiled when she saw him. Really smiled. The kind of smile I hadn't seen in years. Then he leaned in and kissed her. And just like that, whatever was left of my marriage died. I gripped the steering wheel so hard I thought I might break it. The world around me blurred. The sounds of passing cars fading into nothing. All I could see was her, my wife, laughing as she leaned into another man's arms. She touched him the way she used to touch me, smiled at him like he was her whole world. It wasn't some meaningless mistake. It wasn't a moment of weakness. This was love, or at least what she thought love was. Because no one smiled like that, no one melted like that, unless they truly wanted to be there. I had spent months doubting myself, questioning my instincts, wondering if I was just imagining things. But this was real. This was proof that my marriage had been dead long before today. I had just been too blind to see the corpse rotting in front of me. I watched as they disappeared inside the hotel, walking side by side like a real couple, like we used to. My stomach twisted, rage clawing at my insides. I had told myself I wouldn't confront her, that I wouldn't cause a scene, but the truth was standing right there, slapping me across the face, daring me to act. I didn't even remember getting out of the car, didn't remember the walk to the hotel entrance. By the time I reached the front desk, my pulse was hammering so loudly I could barely hear myself speak. "The couple who just walked in," I said, forcing my voice to stay even. "What room?" The receptionist barely glanced at me. "Sorry, sir. We don't give out guest information." I exhaled slowly, trying to keep control. "Listen, I know my wife is in there with another man. I just need to. Sir, if you don't have a reservation, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." A small, bitter laugh escaped my lips. This was it. This was how it ended. With a hotel receptionist shutting me down while my wife undressed for someone else in a room just a few floors above me. I turned and walked out, my legs numb. I sat in my car, gripping the seat, breathing through the fire burning in my chest. I had two choices. I could storm up there, kick the door down, make a spectacle of it, or I could do what I really needed to do, end it. Not just today, not just the marriage, but her. The version of her that had convinced herself she could lie to me forever. The version of me that had been too stupid to see it coming. I pulled out my phone and dialed Maxim. He picked up on the second ring. "You see it?" "Yeah," I said, my voice hollow. "You want me to take care of it?" I knew what he meant. He wasn't talking about beating the guy up or scaring him off. Maxim had access to information. He could destroy Dennis's life. His marriage, his career, his reputation with just a few clicks. A few well-placed emails. It was tempting. But no, I didn't want revenge. I wanted out. "Send me the divorce lawyer's contact," I said instead. Maxim was silent for a moment. Then, "Good choice." I hung up and stared at the hotel entrance one last time. The place where my marriage had drawn its final breath. Then I drove away, and I didn't look back. The next few days passed in a blur. I went through the motions, barely eating, barely sleeping. I met with the lawyer Maxim recommended. We discussed the legalities, the financial split, the house. I had bought it before we married, so it was mine. The lawyer assured me Sofia wouldn't get much, not legally. But I wasn't thinking about money. I was thinking about the moment she would find out. I didn't tell her right away. I let her live in her illusion a little longer. Let her come home to me every night with that same fake smile, pretending she was exhausted from work when she had been exhausting herself with him. Then, one evening, I set the papers on the kitchen table. She walked in, dropping her bag by the door like she always did. "Hey, babe." Then she saw them. The blood drained from her face. "What's this?" "You tell me," I said, leaning back in my chair. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the pages. "Oleg, you don't get to say my name like that anymore," I interrupted. "Not after what you've done." She looked up at me, her eyes wide. You know?" I laughed. A sharp, humorless sound. "Oh, I know, Sofia. I know everything. Dennis, the hotel, the lies, months of it. Did you really think I'd never find out?" Tears welled in her eyes. "I can explain." "Don't insult me," I snapped. "You don't explain betrayal. You don't justify it. You don't get to play the victim when you were the one stabbing me in the back every night." She broke then, sinking into the chair across from me, her hands gripping the table like it was the only thing holding her up. "I didn't mean to." I slammed my fist down, making her jump. "Stop lying." My voice was raw, filled with something dark and exhausted. "You meant to, every time, every text, every meeting, every time you walked into that hotel you made a choice. And now you get to live with it." She sobbed, covering her face with her hands. "Oleg, I love you." I exhaled, shaking my head. "No, you don't. You loved me once. Maybe. But you killed that love the moment you let another man take my place." Her sobs grew louder, but I didn't care. Not anymore. I stood up, pushing the divorce papers toward her. "Sign them." She didn't move. I leaned in close, lowering my voice to something cold and final. If you don't, I'll make sure Dennis's wife knows everything. Her head snapped up, her tear-streaked face frozen in shock. You wouldn't. I smirked. Try me. A long silence stretched between us. Then, with shaking hands, she picked up the pen. And just like that, our marriage was over. Sofia's fingers trembled as she signed her name on the divorce papers. The ink barely dried before she dropped the pen, staring at me like she had just woken up from a nightmare. But the truth was, she had been the one to create it. Tears still clung to her lashes, her breath coming in uneven gasps. Oleg, please. I pushed my chair back, standing to my full height. You don't get to please me anymore. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a knife. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, her gaze darting between me and the papers she had just signed. Can we at least talk? Not as husband and wife, just... I scoffed. As what? Friends. The bitterness in my voice was undeniable. You weren't my friend when you were sneaking off to hotel rooms, Sofia. She flinched like I had slapped her. For the first time in years, I saw her for what she really was. Not my wife, not my partner, but a stranger. A woman who wore my last name while giving her heart, her body, to another man. I walked over to the table and picked up the papers. They felt heavier than they should have, like they carried the weight of every lie, every betrayal. I held them up between us. This is all that's left of us. Her eyes filled with fresh tears, but I didn't care, couldn't care. If I let myself feel anything for her now, I might drown in it. I never wanted this, she whispered, clenched my jaw. Neither did I. She shook her head frantically. No, I never wanted to lose you. I never stopped loving you, Oleg. I was just lost. I let out a slow breath, forcing myself to stay calm. Lost, I repeated, my voice eerily steady. You weren't lost, Sofia. You were selfish. You didn't care what this would do to me, what it would do to us. You just wanted more. Her lips parted, but she had no argument, no defense. For months, she had lied effortlessly, kissed me while carrying the taste of another man on her lips. And now she wanted to pretend it was a mistake? She had chosen this, and now she had to live with the consequences. You need to leave, I said finally. She blinked, as if she hadn't processed my words. What? I gestured toward the door. You don't live here anymore. Pack what you need and go. Her lower lip trembled. Oleg, get out. Silence. For a long moment, she just stared at me, searching for something. Sympathy, regret, forgiveness. But I had nothing left to give her. Finally, she stood, wiping at her face as she turned away. She moved toward the bedroom, but I grabbed her wrist before she could step inside. Not that one, I said, my voice colder than I thought possible. She hesitated, looking up at me with wide, broken eyes. I gestured toward the guest room. You can pack from there. You don't get to step foot in our room ever again. A fresh wave of pain crossed her face, but I didn't flinch. Without another word, she turned and disappeared into the guest room. I stood in the kitchen, listening to the sound of drawers opening and closing, the rustle of fabric as she stuffed clothes into a suitcase. Every sound was a reminder that the woman I had loved, the woman I had built a life with, was gone. By the time she emerged, dragging a half-packed suitcase behind her, her face was pale. I'll come back for the rest later. I nodded, arms crossed. Let me know when. I won't be here. She hesitated at the door, fingers curling around the handle. Oleg, don't. I cut her off. Her shoulders slumped. She looked at me one last time, then stepped outside. And just like that, our house was empty. The moment the door clicked shut, a wave of exhaustion crashed over me. My knees felt weak, my chest tight, my head pounding with everything I had been holding back. I sank into a chair, staring at the divorce papers still clutched in my hands. It was over. The anger, the betrayal, the lies. None of it mattered anymore. Because the woman I had fought for, the woman I had trusted, had walked out of my life for good. and for the first time in months, I could finally breathe. The house felt hollow without her. For 7 years, every corner of this place had been filled with her presence. Her perfume lingering in the hallway, her laughter echoing in the kitchen, the faint sound of her singing in the shower. But now it was just me and the silence. And the silence was deafening. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the divorce papers I had thrown there hours ago. The ink had dried, her signature staring back at me like a final nail in the coffin of everything we had built. I thought I would feel relief, maybe even satisfaction, but all I felt was exhaustion. I had spent months suspecting, weeks gathering proof, days preparing for this moment. And now that it was here, I realized something I hadn't before. There was nothing left to fight for. Sofia was gone, not just from the house, but from my life, from my future, from the version of reality where we grew old together, had kids, built a life worth remembering. That version of reality had been a lie. I leaned back in the chair, rubbing my hands over my face. I needed a drink, something strong. But drinking alone in an empty house, drowning in my own bitterness, that was the kind of pathetic I refused to become. Instead, I grabbed my phone. I didn't want to talk to Sofia. I had nothing left to say to her, but I needed to hear someone's voice, someone who wasn't a liar. I scrolled through my contacts until I landed on a name. Daniel. The phone rang twice before he picked up. Oleg. His voice was groggy, probably asleep. I checked the time.
2:34 Uhr nachts.
Damn.
Sorry, man, I måtte red.
Didn't mean to wake you. He was silent for a second, then sighed. She's gone, isn't she? I let out a slow breath. Yeah. Another pause. Then, good. That made me laugh. A short, dry sound. You're not even gonna pretend to feel bad? Why the hell would I? She cheated on you, man. Lied to you for months. She didn't deserve to stay. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. Then why does it still feel like shit? Because you're not a heartless bastard, Daniel said simply. Because even after everything she did, you still remember who she used to be. And that version of her? That's the one you're grieving. Not the one who betrayed you. I stared at the divorce papers. I hate that you're right. Yeah. I'm full of wisdom at 2 a.m, he joked, but his tone softened.
Listen, man.
You did the right thing, and I know it doesn't feel like it now, but eventually you're gonna wake up and realize you're free. Free. The word rolled around in my mind, foreign and unfamiliar. I had spent so long being Sofia's boyfriend, Sofia's husband, that I had forgotten what it meant to just be me. Daniel yawned. You want me to come over? I almost said no, almost told him I was fine. But the truth was I wasn't. I didn't want to be alone in this house tonight. Yeah, I admitted. That'd be good. All right, give me 20 minutes. And put some beer in the fridge. I snorted. You're the one coming over. Bring your own damn beer. He laughed. Fair enough. I hung up, feeling lighter. Just a little. And for the first time since Sofia had walked out that door, I didn't feel completely alone. Daniel showed up with 2 six-packs and a bag of greasy fast food. Figured you probably haven't eaten, he said, tossing the bag on the table. He was right. I hadn't even thought about food. We sat in the living room, eating burgers and drinking beer like we were back in college. It was normal.
Familiar.
Something to hold on to when everything else felt like it was slipping away. After a while, Daniel leaned back, studying me. So what now? I exhaled. Hell if I know. You gonna tell her family? That made me pause. Sofia's parents had always liked me, especially her mom. They had treated me like a son since the day I married her. Would they even believe me if I told them what she did? Or would she spin some sob story about how I gave up on her? Daniel must have seen the hesitation on my face because he shook his head. Don't let her control the narrative, Oleg. If you don't tell them the truth, she will. And I guarantee you, she's not gonna make herself the villain. I knew he was right, but the thought of having that conversation, of watching her mother's face fall as she realized what her daughter had done, it made me feel sick. I'll do it tomorrow, I muttered. Daniel nodded. Good. We sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the soft hum of the refrigerator. Then he smirked. You know, you're a free man now. No cheating wife holding you back. Maybe it's time to explore your options. I shot him a look. I just got divorced, Daniel. So? He shrugged. You don't have to marry the next girl you meet. Just go out. Live a little. I scoffed. And do what? Have a one-night stand just to prove I can. Why not? I didn't answer, because the truth was, I wasn't ready for that. Maybe I should be out there, making Sofia nothing more than a bad memory. But I wasn't there yet. I finished my beer and set the bottle down with a hollow clink. I don't know who I am without her, Daniel. He watched me for a long moment. Then he said, maybe it's time to find out. His words settled in my chest, heavy and real. Maybe he was right. Maybe it was time to stop looking at the past and start figuring out who I was going to be next. By the time Daniel left, the sun was starting to rise. I stood at the window, watching as the first light of morning crept over the horizon. It felt symbolic in a way. A new day, a new life. I didn't know what came next, but for the first time since this nightmare began, I was ready to find out. Morning light poured through the window, casting long shadows across the floor. The house was still empty in a way that felt deeper than just the absence of another person. It was hollow in the way that only a broken home could be. I stood at the kitchen sink, staring blankly out at the quiet street, my coffee growing cold in my hands. Last night had been the first time in months that I had felt something close to normal. Daniel's presence had reminded me that my life wasn't over just because my marriage was. But this morning, reality settled in like a weight pressing on my chest. Sofia was really gone. The house was mine now, officially, legally. Every plate, every chair, every framed photo that she hadn't taken with her. It all belonged to me. And yet, everywhere I looked, I saw her ghost. Her coffee mug still sat on the counter, the one with the chipped handle she refused to throw away. Her favorite blanket, the one she always curled up with on the couch, was still draped over the armrest. The scent of her perfume still lingered in the air, faint but unmistakable. I exhaled sharply, gripping the edge of the sink. Enough. If I was ever going to move forward, I had to let go of everything she had left behind. I grabbed a box from the closet and started filling it. The mug, the blanket, the little trinkets she had scattered around the house. Things I had never paid attention to before but now felt like tiny landmines waiting to explode. Every item I placed in the box felt like cutting a tether, like taking back a piece of myself. By the time I finished, the house looked different. It wasn't ours anymore. It was mine. That afternoon, I did something I had been dreading. I called Sofia's mother. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm as ever. Oleg, dear, how are you? I hesitated, my throat tightening. She didn't know yet. I imagined Sofia sitting across from her at the dinner table, laughing, pretending everything was fine. Had she planned on telling them? Or was she hoping I would stay quiet, letting them believe I was the one who walked away? I took a deep breath. I wanted to tell you this myself before you heard it from someone else. Sofia and I were getting a divorce. Silence. Then a sharp inhale. Oh my God. Oleg, what happened? I swallowed. She cheated on me. Pause. Then softly, no. I could hear the disbelief in her voice. The heartbreak. I'm sorry, I said, though I wasn't sure why. Are you sure? She asked, like she wanted me to tell her I had made a mistake. I'm sure, I said quietly. Caught her. I have proof. Another silence. Then her voice cracked. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. She sniffled. I never thought she would do something like this. Not to you. Neither had I. She's still my daughter, she said, her voice shaking. But I won't defend what she did. You didn't deserve this, Oleg. You were good to her. I closed my eyes, letting out a slow breath. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear that. Thank you, I murmured. She cleared her throat. If you ever need anything, you'll always be family to me. no matter what happens. A lump formed in my throat. That means a lot. We talked for a little longer, but the conversation felt heavy, painful. When we finally hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring at the phone. Telling her had made it real, not just for me, but for everyone. There was no going back now. Days passed, then weeks. The ache didn't go away overnight. Some mornings, I still woke up expecting to hear Sofia in the shower, humming some off-key tune. Some nights, I caught myself glancing at my phone, half expecting a message from her. Some last-ditch effort to fix what she had broken. But the messages never came. She had made her choice, and now I was making mine. I focused on rebuilding, not just my house but myself. I picked up extra hours at work, went to the gym more often, met up with old friends I had drifted away from during my marriage. I forced myself to say yes to invitations, even when all I wanted to do was sit alone in my quiet house. And slowly, painfully, I started feeling like me again. One evening, as I sat at a bar with Daniel, nursing a drink, he nudged me. "You know, you could start dating again." I smirked. "Is this your way of telling me I look pathetic?" "No," he said. "This is my way of telling you that life doesn't end just because one woman screwed you over." I huffed, swirling the amber liquid in my glass. "I don't know if I'm ready for that." Daniel shrugged. "You don't have to be, but you will be." I didn't answer, because for the first time I actually believed he might be right. That weekend, I cleaned out the last of Sofia's things. I found a small box tucked away in the back of the closet, filled with old letters, concert tickets, little souvenirs from trips we had taken together. I almost threw it out. Almost. But instead, I carried it to the backyard, sat down and opened it. One by one, I looked at everything inside. Read the letters. Remembered the good times. Allowed myself to feel it all, really feel it. One last time. Then I lit a fire, and I watched as the past turned to ash. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something close to peace. Sofia had been a part of my life, a big part, but she was not my whole life, and she never would be again. That night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my phone buzzed. A message from a number I didn't recognize. Unknown. I don't know if this is a bad idea, but drink sometime? I frowned, my tired brain trying to place the number. Then it hit me. Oño, Daniel's sister. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then slowly I typed a response. Me, why not? I hit send. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself smile. The message from Anya sat on my screen, glowing in the dim light of my bedroom. I read it twice, then a third time, as if expecting the words to change. It had been weeks since I signed the divorce papers. Weeks of rebuilding, of finding my footing again. I wasn't sure if I was ready to go on a date, or whatever this was supposed to be. But as I lay there, staring at my phone, I realized something. I wasn't not ready either, and maybe that was enough. I typed my response, "Why not?" and hit send before I could overthink it. Her reply came almost immediately. "Anya, Saturday, 7 p.m., that bar near the square? Me sounds good." I tossed my phone onto the nightstand and exhaled. A part of me still felt hesitant, but another part, the part that was tired of feeling broken, felt something else. Curiosity. Saturday came faster than I expected. I stood in front of my closet, staring at the rows of shirts like they held the answers to my entire existence. I hadn't been on a first date in almost a decade. What the hell did people even wear to these things now? I settled on dark jeans and a button-up, something casual but not careless. As I buttoned my cuffs, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. I looked different. The man staring back at me wasn't the same one who had been shattered by betrayal. He wasn't whole yet, but he was getting there. And that was enough. I grabbed my keys and headed out. The bar was dimly lit, crowded but not overwhelmingly so. Anya was already there, sitting in a booth near the back, stirring her drink absent-mindedly. When she saw me, she smiled. Not the polite kind, not the fake kind. A real, genuine smile. "You showed up," she teased as I slid into the seat across from her. I smirked. You sound surprised. A little, she admitted. Divorce doesn't exactly make people eager to jump back into the world. I leaned back, studying her. So why'd you ask me? She shrugged, taking a sip of her drink. Because you looked like you needed a reminder that life doesn't stop just because someone broke your heart. I let that sit between us for a moment. Maybe she was right. Maybe I did need that reminder. The conversation flowed easier than I expected. Anya wasn't like Sofia. She wasn't guarded, wasn't performing some version of herself that she thought I wanted to see. She was just her, blunt, sarcastic, but with an undercurrent of warmth that made it impossible not to relax around her. Halfway through the night, she leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand. So, tell me the truth. Have you imagined running into her again? I exhaled sharply, caught off guard by the question. You don't pull punches, do you? She grinned. Not my style. I thought about it. Had I? Of course I had. I had imagined it 100 different ways. Her showing up at my door, begging for another chance. Running into her at a coffee shop, watching her face crumble when she realized I was fine without her. Or worse, seeing her happy. Seeing her with him. I took a sip of my drink, rolling the glass between my fingers. I don't know. Maybe. But I don't think it would change anything. Anya tilted her head. And if she walked in here right now? I glanced toward the entrance instinctively, half expecting to see Sofia's silhouette against the neon glow of the bar lights. But the doorway was empty. I think, I said slowly, I'd finish my drink. Anya nodded, smiling slightly. Good answer. The night stretched on, the weight on my chest growing lighter with every passing minute. I wasn't sure what this was. Whether it was the start of something or just two people finding comfort in each other's company. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about Sofia. And that was enough. When I got home, the house didn't feel quite so empty. I tossed my keys on the counter, loosened the top button of my shirt, and let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My phone buzzed. Anya, that wasn't terrible. I'd do it again. I chuckled, shaking my head as I typed a reply. Me, is that your way of asking me on a second date? Anya. It's my way of saying don't disappear into your cave again. I smirked. Me, noted. As I set my phone down, I realized something. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't just surviving. I was living. And maybe, just maybe, I was finally ready to move forward. The days after my night with Anya felt different. Not in a dramatic, life-changing way. The pain of the past hadn't magically disappeared, and I wasn't suddenly a brand new man. But something had shifted. The weight on my chest was a little lighter. The silence in my house wasn't quite as suffocating. I wasn't healed, but for the first time I felt like I could be. Anya and I kept in touch. We didn't label anything, didn't rush into whatever this was becoming. She checked in on me, made sure I wasn't isolating myself, dragged me out for drinks when she thought I needed it, and the truth was, I needed it more than I realized. One evening, I was in my kitchen, making dinner when my phone buzzed. A number I hadn't seen in weeks. Sofia. I stared at the screen, my chest tightening. I could have ignored it. I probably should have. But something inside me whispered that this was the last piece of closure I needed. I answered. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, a quiet breath. Oleg. Her voice was softer than I remembered, weaker, as if she had been carrying her own weight of regrets. I wasn't sure if you'd pick up, she admitted. Neither was I said flatly. She exhaled. I wanted to talk. One last time. I leaned against the counter, gripping the phone a little tighter. Why? Another silence. Then, because I miss you. The words should have cut me, but they didn't. Not anymore. You don't miss me, I said evenly. You miss the man who loved you before he knew the truth. She inhaled sharply. That's not fair. I let out a bitter chuckle. Fair? You want to talk about fair now, Sofia? I made a mistake. You made months of mistakes, I corrected. Every time you saw him, every time you lied to me, Every time you came home and kissed me like nothing was wrong. You didn't just break my heart, Sofia. You shattered everything. Her breath hitched. I know. I didn't respond. I wasn't happy, Oleg, she whispered. I don't know when it started, but I felt like I was suffocating. And then I met him, and it was exciting, and I told myself it didn't mean anything. But it did. I finished for her.
A Sofia soube.
I'm so sorry. I rubbed a hand over my face. I know you are, but it doesn't change anything. Don't you ever think about what we had? She asked. Doesn't any part of you wish we could go back? I closed my eyes, remembering the good times. The laughter, the lazy Sunday mornings, the feeling of coming home to her. Then I remembered the lies, the betrayal, the way she smiled at him, the way she used to smile at me. And just like that, the nostalgia disappeared. No, I said firmly. We're done, Sofia, and I'm done holding on to something that died the moment you chose him. She let out a shaky breath. I understand. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Goodbye, Sofia. Goodbye, Oleg. I hung up, and this time I didn't feel empty. I felt free. Later that night, I met up with Anya. We walked through the city, the cool night air carrying the scent of autumn. She glanced at me, hands tucked into her jacket pockets. You look lighter, she said. I smirked. I feel lighter. She tilted her head. Did something happen? I exhaled, staring up at the dark sky. Sofia called. Her eyebrows shot up. And I said goodbye. Anya studied me for a moment, then nodded approvingly. Good. We walked in silence for a while, the city buzzing softly around us. Then, she nudged me with her elbow. So, where do you go from here? I thought about it. For the first time in a long time, I had no answer, no plan, no idea what the future held. And that felt good. I turned to Anya, a slow smile spreading across my lips. Wherever the hell I want. The end.